Every now and then we check in with the Battle Creek Public Schools and Superintendent Kim Carter, and today is one of those days. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Richard. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here today. So the good work continues right now as we try and get things moving in the right direction at Battle Creek Public Schools. How do you feel today? We're sort of at a point at the end of the year where we take a breath and look back and all of that. How do you feel today about all of this stuff?
I am feeling great, and this is such an appropriate time to come and have this conversation with you today. We're doing some amazing things in Battle Creek Public Schools, and last night we adopted a revised budget that stays away from that early warning sign. So we're making some tremendous progress and looking forward to great things in Battle Creek.
Well, that's good to hear. In fact, there was certain publicity given to the notion that in November the report from the auditors was one of a warning, and you try to take those things in context. I've been on nonprofit boards, for example. You go through an audit once a year and the accountant says, well, here's a little warning or that, and here's how you should interpret that, or at least here's how we interpret that. And sometimes these things sound more dire than they are. But in November, the report from the auditors was pretty clear, wasn't it? The state is watching.
Very clear. That was our heads up to say, if you do nothing, you will at the end of the year be in early warning status. And so that was a key for us to really dig in and do some looking at our expenditures to determine how we could create better outcomes for kids while also reducing our expenses.
How did you do it?
We did a very rigorous process called zero-based budgeting. We engaged in all of our stakeholders, from our staff members, our leaders, cabinet, working and looking at each line of our budget to determine where we could possibly make some cuts that wouldn't adversely impact the students we serve.
Well, and that has to be a tough job.
It really is, but you know what? We were committed to ensuring that we did not touch programs for children. And at the end of the day, the auditors told us, if you do nothing, you will be at a 2.8% fund balance. And we know that going below 5% was early warning. Last night, we adopted a revised budget that puts us at 7.6%.
Okay. And early warning simply means that if you're below that 5%, the state starts to say, okay, we have to be ready to catch you. You could be falling here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They say you're in danger of becoming a deficit district. We need to come in and watch you a lot more closely. It really means a lot more oversight for us. But we want to maintain control of our own future. And as a result, a lot of committed Battle Creek Public Schools employees dug in and did the work.
Kim Carter is here, Superintendent of the Battle Creek Public Schools. We'll talk about what that means in some detail coming up in just a moment on WBCK. We're here with Superintendent Kim Carter, Battle Creek Public Schools. So in under the wire, you said 7% balance, so that keeps the state away for now. How did you do it? You say you didn't affect programs at all. What can you do when that's off limits?
So we look at the things that are necessary and we prioritize. Are we doing things that we really don't need to do, or are we doing things that can be done in a different way? And so those were some of the things that we talked about and looked at. Another thing is that we became very creative in using our grant funds and how do we provide supplemental funds for the programs that we want to provide for children while not impacting services. So that takes a lot of creativity, a lot of work, and a lot of out-of-the-box thinking, but we have the crew at Battle Creek Public Schools that knew exactly what needed to be done. So we're excited about that.
So as you look at this then going forward, this is a budget for the coming year, yes, or is this a current budget amendment?
This is a current budget amendment, and so as we stated last night, there's more work to be done because we have to look forward to the 17-18. So we pretty much put a period at the end of 16-17, and we are right now beginning the work on 17-18.
And as you look at this then, we know that one of the core challenges that has us in this spot is the declining enrollment issue. How do you look at budget, which is sort of an emergency kind of approach, a stopgap problem-solving moment, and then say, okay, the enrollment issue then is another issue that we have to attack. Do you have to keep both of those in mind? And then how do you look at that after you're through with the budget amendment?
Yes, because we consider that to be a both-and strategy.
Yeah.
You can't do one at a time. We have to look at how we reduce our expenses while also generating revenue, which means that we need to really address the declining enrollment problem. And so part of our solution and strategy is to survey our families that live in the district that might be making other choices, to find out why they are making those choices and what can we do to bring them back to Battle Creek Public Schools. And we're also going to focus on creating new programs that will entice our families to come back to Battle Creek and then to tell our story. We have a lot of amazing offerings. We have AP classes at our high school. We are offering restorative justice practices in all of our schools, peer mediation to create safe school environments. We have a REACH program that speaks to our academically talented students. We have interventions for all kids who are in need of additional supports. We have instructional coaches in every single building. So there are lots of programs and services that we offer, and it's about making sure that our families know that we have them.
And as you talk about new programs and educating folks about this, talking to families that might have made other choices, this is a turn on a dime kind of thing, because as that enrollment falls, there has to be some kind of counter action to this that works fast.
Yes, and so that's why it's very important that we understand what our community needs are so that we can respond appropriately. It isn't about what we think is best, it's what we know is best based on the responses that we're receiving from our families. So we're going to have a lot of conversations. I'm going to continue that as we move forward to find out what will it take to move Battle Creek from good to great.
You know, we have a lot of conversations here with community leaders and folks who have opinions about things. One of the discussions we had to do with the schools, and we were talking with Dr. Joe Schwartz, and he said these districts here, Battle Creek, Lakeview, Harper Creek, Penfield, they have to come together and have a meeting about what's happening here and try to work together. And he made it sound urgent, like it's an emergency meeting that has to happen soon to talk about these issues, the issues of schools of choice and enrollment and all of this, and work together to try and solve that. Do you think that that's true and that it is that urgent?
Well, to a point, I do believe that that's true, but I also want to say that we do have a regular meeting and we are having communication and conversation about, because this isn't just about Battle Creek Public Schools, it's about the community of Battle Creek. And so we are all invested in the success of all of the children in this area, and we're trying to work together to see how we can improve that.
Mm-hmm. And I presume that our neighboring districts are the choices for some folks who were once sending their kids to Battle Creek Public Schools. How do those conversations go? I mean, can you say to those other districts, hey, we want those kids back. Will you help us with that? I mean, I guess that's an odd thing to say.
I don't know that we have that type of conversation. Instead, it's more about there are a significant number of children who need an education in this community. And so what do we do to make sure that we're servicing each and every one of them well?
Mm-hmm. And then the districts respond accordingly in each one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so we just focus on what is it that Battle Creek Public Schools needs to do to remain sustainable and to remain effective for our children.
Kim Carter is here, Superintendent, Battle Creek Public Schools. More coming up in just a moment on WBCK. Few more minutes on WBCK with Superintendent Kim Carter of the Battle Creek Public Schools. You know, one of the things that has come with realigning the district, if you will, is buildings that aren't being used. We certainly have talked about that on a fairly regular basis, Fremont being one of those, and there's some discussions going on about what might happen with that building.
Yes, part of our 6 goals to greatness under our strategic plan is to look at our cost-bearing facilities that are empty and create either reuse or repurpose strategies for each one of those buildings. Fremont is one of them. We have an offer from the Sojourner Truth Museum, and we are looking at negotiating a sale for that property right now. That property has not been finalized yet. We're just in negotiations at this point. We also have some interested parties who are looking at Southwestern. They are in the process of a feasibility study right now, and once that concludes, we would be able to finalize a deal there. Our goal is to look at how we can reuse or repurpose these properties so that they aren't continuing to cost the district and help us, again, reduce our expenses.
We're talking about some serious square footage here in these buildings. When you started shopping for potential buyers, what was the notion that you got that these kinds of large buildings are in demand, or do you have to search for the right folks? How does this work? I mean, what's the climate here?
Actually, we've been lucky in that they have come to us knowing that we have some properties that we need to reuse or repurpose.
Great.
The other thing is I have to thank the city of Battle Creek, who has been very instrumental in partnering with us. And as individuals have demonstrated a need, they've said, hey, look at Battle Creek Public Schools. There are a couple properties that you might want to consider.
Yeah, boy, that's great, considering, too, the city has its own fish on the fryer in that department too, with empty properties. So how do you feel about, for example, the Fremont situation? Does that deal feel like it has solid footing to you?
I think it does. At this point, my job is to negotiate sales for that property. Where it goes from there is up to those who have purchased it. We do look at what will be the benefit to the community as we try to decide whether or not that's a sale that we want to move forward with. And so I'm very hopeful that the Sojourner Truth Museum will be a possibility for this community. I think it has great value.
All right, so here we are at the end of the year. We have a new budget amendment sorted out. What's the purview on the coming, say, 6 months? Do you think that another budget amendment will be in order? What's the feeling as you go through this round? Will you need to do it again?
I don't think so. We might at the end of the year, and hopefully that will be for the good. But right now, our focus is on the 2017-18 budget. We are very committed to making sure that we have a good idea of what we need to do in order to make those changes so that we can really focus on instruction, teaching, and learning. We want to get to a point where the budget is not the thing that we're talking about all the time, but instead we're talking about the great programs that we have for kids.
What's the feeling about enrollment in the next school year? Is this going to be the year that we can start to pivot the other way?
I think when we look at our projections, we might continue to see a decline in enrollment, but we see a steady decrease in that. And then as we implement newer programs, I anticipate that that's going to turn around and we will be solvent and sustainable.
All right, so you can see some light down there in that distance there, which is good to hear. Here we go now with a couple of weeks off. How do you approach this now? We hear about how over the summer some students certainly are encouraged to continue to read and so on and try to maybe stem a slowdown in learning when you're not in the environment for a period of time. Is it that way, too, when you take even a couple of weeks off like this?
Every break matters, and so we want to make sure that our families know the importance of continuing to read every night, 30 minutes or more for every child, pre-K through 12th grade, making sure that they still have some sort of academic activities occurring in their lives, limit that TV and electronic time, because every break does matter. And so I'm hoping that they take the opportunity to visit our wonderful Willard Library. There are so many great things to do in Battle Creek, and so I hope that they take advantage of that.
Limit electronic time. Some of we adults could take a little note out of that too, couldn't we?
Exactly. I'm going to try to take my own advice.
Okay. Yes, I'll try as well. That sounds like reasonable advice. All right. We'll stay in touch, and as the year goes on, we'll look forward to updates.
Thank you.
Thank you. Superintendent Kim Carter, Battle Creek Public Schools.